A girl, originally a fleeing servant, was mistakenly identified as a noble lady in an accident. She then replaced the lady and started a new life for herself. Gu Deok was born a lowly servant. Her mother died from overwork at the landlord's house, and her father's health was deteriorating. Her daily task was to serve the spoiled young lady, taking care of her every need, including eating, drinking, and relieving herself, as well as studying and embroidery for her. Over time, while the lady achieved nothing, Gu Deok learned many skills. Her greatest wish was to escape the landlord's house with her father, but that required a lot of money. Therefore, Gu Deok often sneaked out to copy novels for money. One day she learned that the lady was engaged to be married. Curious, Gu Deok wondered which gentleman would choose such a lazy lady. A friend mentioned that the gentleman was somewhat eccentric and a perfect match for the lady. Gu Deok didn't find it amusing, she rather felt sorry for him. Meanwhile, upon receiving the engagement news, Cheon Seung-hwi, curious, asked his stepmother about his fiancée. His stepmother described her as a smart and capable commoner lady, a perfect match for him. Satisfied, Cheon Seung-hwi planned to sneak a peek, but learned from his servant that his fiancée was notoriously temperamental and ignorant in reading and embroidery. The truly smart and capable one was her servant, Gu Deok. Rather than getting angry, Cheon Seung-hwi became very interested in Gu Deok. Pretending to be a cousin of his servant, he wanted to meet this servant named Gu Deok. He happened to see her disguised as a man selling peanuts on the street. When Gu Deok saw Cheon Seung-hwi, she tried hard to get him to look after her business. Although Cheon Seung-hwi was not persuaded to buy, he greatly admired Gu Deok's eloquence. At that moment, the young lady arrived on the street to watch a performance. Terrified, Gu Deok fled in panic and ran a long distance before she dared to stop. However, before she could catch her breath, she suddenly collided with Cheon Seung-hwi from behind and noticed he was dressed in noble attire. Realizing his high status, Gu Deok quickly apologized for her earlier rudeness. Cheon Seung-hwi did not mind, and instead took her outside the city walls to talk. Looking down disdainfully at a play about poor people achieving happiness, Cheon Seung-hwi deemed the story too cliché. Gu Deok argued that for people of low birth like them, such stories represented the hope that sustained them through tough times. Cheon Seung-hwi felt ashamed, realizing he had underestimated his understanding of the world and had been taught a lesson by a servant. To thank Gu Deok, Cheon Seung-hwi gave her a jade pendant as they parted, hoping they would meet again. It was the first gift Gu Deok had ever received, and she treasured it dearly. The next day was Cheon Seung-hwi's father's birthday. Gu Deok took a job helping in the kitchen, but her pastries were recognized by the young lady. Furious, the lady stormed into the kitchen, frightening Gu Deok into hiding. By mistake, Gu Deok ended up in Cheon Seung-hwi's courtyard. As the lady pursued her, Gu Deok had no choice but to accept Cheon Seung-hwi's kindness and hide in his bedroom. However, behind a screen, Gu Deok accidentally overheard Cheon Seung-hwi planning to break off his engagement. She was so shocked that she made a noise and was caught red-handed by the lady. The lady flew into a rage, convinced that Gu Deok had seduced her fiancé, which was why he wanted to break off the engagement. Despite Gu Deok's explanations, the lady would not listen. She returned home and beat Gu Deok severely. Unable to bear seeing Gu Deok being beaten, her father desperately intervened, which only infuriated the lady even more. To disgrace Gu Deok, the young lady planned to have her serve the master tonight. Cornered, Gu Deok used her last bit of strength to signal her father with a prearranged escape gesture. After cleaning up, she was sent into the master's room. As she undid her robe, she secretly pulled a sickle from her sleeve and swiftly ended the master's life. Hearing the noise, the young lady rushed in, and Gu Deok pushed her to the ground and threw the contents of a chamber pot over her. Gu Deok then fled the landlord's home with her father, heading north. However, the young lady, unable to let the matter go, hired bounty hunters at a high price to capture them. Unbeknownst to her, Cheon Seung-hwi intercepted the hunters and paid them more to stop their pursuit. Afterwards, Cheon Seung-hwi also left Hanyang. Meanwhile, after crossing mountains and rivers, father and daughter settled in an inn. However, when Gu Deok woke up, her father was gone. Fearing his illness would burden her, he had left under the cover of night. To wait for her father's return, Gu Deok asked the innkeeper for shelter. A year passed without news of her father. But Gu Deok and the innkeeper grew as close as mother and daughter. To evade the pursuit of soldiers, Gu Deok had to wear a fake mole on her face every day. Yet, she still faced harassment from some men. Feeling overwhelmed, she was suddenly confronted by a group of officials. The innkeeper quickly hid her inside, and she escaped detection. This was Gu Deok's first encounter with Ok Tae-young. Gu Deok instinctively bowed her head upon seeing her, but Ok Tae-young seemed different from other young ladies. She not only struck up a conversation with Gu Deok, but also picked out jewelry for her while shopping. Gu Deok was flattered but frightened by this unexpected kindness. Seeing Ok Tae-young stand up to protect her, Gu Deok was deeply moved. Through their time together, she realized that Ok Tae-young, despite being born into wealth, did not consider herself superior. Instead, she was kind-hearted, feeling it her duty to aid those in hardship. This was Gu Deok's first experience of equality among nobility. She especially admired Ok Tae-young's dream of becoming an advocate for the illiterate and those unaware of the law. When the innkeeper saw how well they got along, she boldly asked if Ok Tae-young could shelter Gu Deok to spare her a life of hiding. Ok Tae-young agreed without hesitation, already considering Gu Deok a friend. That evening, the innkeeper presented new clothes she had made, advising Gu Deok to live well with the young lady, and promising to write if her father returned to the inn. Gu Deok was immensely grateful. On the eve of their departure, Ok Tae-young acknowledged Gu Deok as her sister, and gave her a ring as a keepsake, mentioning it was her first visit home. To help Gu Deok adapt to her new role, she introduced her to her family, whom she had never met. Just as Gu Deok felt like she was dreaming, a scream pierced the air. As they opened the door, a flaming arrow shot into the room. It was the work of the bandit who had harassed Gu Deok, now leading a raid on the inn. Ok Tae-young's father was killed instantly, and the innkeeper did not survive either. With no time to grieve, Gu Deok quickly ushered the young lady inside for safety. Unexpectedly, the bandits locked them in and set the house on fire. As the fire grew larger, Ok Tae-young's leg was broken by a falling beam. Not wanting to burden Gu Deok, she pushed her out forcefully. The house engulfed Ok Tae-young on the spot, and Gu Deok passed out in the thick smoke. When she woke up, she found herself at Ok Tae-young's grandmother's house, identified as Ok Tae-young because of the ring she wore. To survive, Gu Deok had to assume her identity, as it was the only way she could seek revenge for the wrongfully killed lady. However, upon hearing that robbers killed everyone in the inn except for her, Gu Deok felt immense guilt. She knew the lady had sacrificed her life for hers and could no longer deceive her family. Thus, Gu Deok confessed her real status as a servant to the grandmother. She was willing to accept any punishment, asking only that the grandmother take her to see the magistrate because she had seen the murderer. Soon, Gu Deok was at the magistrate's office, revealing the robber's hideout, a location she had discovered accidentally while gathering herbs. The magistrate was curious about how she knew so much. Just as Gu Deok was about to explain everything, her grandmother intervened, claiming her granddaughter had lived there for a while and overheard a servant speaking about it. After describing the robbers, Gu Deok was led away by her grandmother, who hoped she could continue impersonating her granddaughter until the robbers were caught. Thus, Gu Deok continued her role as the lady, but her servant instincts made her uncomfortable in a warm bed, preferring the cold floor for sleep. This confused the servants attending her. Seeing the floor wet, Gu Deok instinctively picked up a rag to wipe it. Madame Mo, the only servant who knew Gu Deok's true identity, quickly closed the door, ready to cover for her whenever her true nature surfaced. Because Gu Deok stayed indoors for a long time, the local ladies started spreading rumors that she was hiding because she had been harassed by bandits. They even wrote letters slandering her. Outraged, Gu Deok responded with a poem that sarcastically called them gossiping country wives, which left several of them pale with anger. Expecting punishment from her grandmother, Gu Deok was instead admired for her spirit and backbone. Later, after the bandits were caught and executed with her testimony, Gu Deok planned to return a keepsake ring and leave. However, her grandmother asked her to stay, placing the ring back on her finger and expressing hope that she would live on behalf of her granddaughter. Over the next 2 years, Gu Deok cultivated her demeanor in a side room, shedding her servile habits and becoming a true noble lady. One day, when her grandmother went to visit relatives in Hanyang, Gu Deok heard from a maid that a famous storyteller was coming to town. Initially uninterested, she changed her mind after seeing a drawing book with a story of a nobleman falling in love with a woman, which mirrored her own story with Cheon Seung-hwi. The next day, she went to the event, and upon seeing the storyteller remove his mask to reveal that he was Cheon Seung-hwi, she was moved to tears by his transformation into a storyteller, bringing joy to the poor. During a performance, Cheon Seung-hwi noticed Gu Deok standing nearby and froze, unaware of a man who looked exactly like him staring intently at him from the audience. By the time Cheon Seung-hwi recovered, Gu Deok had fled. However, the maid noticed the story in her mistress's eyes and created a chance for the two to be alone. As soon as they met, they embraced passionately, but it was all Cheon Seung-hwi's fantasy. Faced with his fervent confession, Gu Deok couldn't face her own feelings as she was living as the young lady, and feared to hope for more. Seeing that she still wore the jade pendant he had given her, Cheon Seung-hwi, unwilling to give up, climbed into Gu Deok's courtyard before leaving town, threatening to shout her servant name unless she agreed to go with him. Helpless, Gu Deok complied and then leaped over the wall. Cheon Seung-hwi had decorated a place by the sea, remembering Gu Deok's dream of living there with her father, hoping they could settle there happily once found. Moved by the life she had always wanted, Gu Deok hesitated. However, at that moment, her maid suddenly died mysteriously, found hanging from a tree. The coroner said it was suicide, but the maid's fractured skull clearly indicated foul play. A servant said it was definitely Baek Do-gwang's doing, who had long coveted the maid and tried persuading her to go to Hanyang. Despite knowing who the real culprit was, Bai Dao-gwang's influential family meant they couldn't seek justice for the maid. Recalling her own miserable past as a servant, Gu Deok couldn't bear to see others suffer similarly. She planned to use her status as a young lady to appeal for justice at the government office for the maid. However, Madame Mo stopped her, wanting revenge for her own daughter, but knowing that if Gu Deok acted, she could never return, especially since her warrant for escaping servitude hadn't been withdrawn. Gu Deok calmed down temporarily, but her dream of defending the people lingered in her mind. Eventually, unwilling to stand tall yet act cowardly, she met with Cheon Seung-hwi at night, turned down his proposal to flee together, and instead brought officers to her home. Gu Deok had a new examination performed on the maid's body, which proved she did not commit suicide. She then accused the lady's son in front of the magistrate, charging him with murder and staging it as suicide. The lady's family was arrested by the officers. Although Gu Deok cleared the maid's name, her actions raised suspicions about her identity with the magistrate. Gu Deok overturned forged evidence and confronted a powerful official's family. Madame Mo was both moved and worried. She and the old lady were the only ones who knew Gu Deok's true identity. Fearing that Gu Deok's actions might draw too much attention and expose her identity, Madame Mo was concerned. But at that moment, Gu Deok was like a flame, determined to carry on the will of her original identity's owner, Ok Tae-young, and overturn all injustices in the world. The next day, the wives of the Women's Federation gathered to discuss their families' cases. They believed that the government wasn't aiming for justice, but was competing with the Federation for local power. Thus, they united to support the Baek family and spent a lot of money to hire a well-versed lawyer. The Baek family's aggressive counterattack began when officials unexpectedly arrested Madame Mo, a victim's family member, alleging that the Baek family had accused her of falsely accusing officials. To prevent Madame Mo from fleeing after a potential loss in court, they arrested her preemptively. Gu Deok was puzzled. The coroner had confessed, so how could they lose? Unexpectedly, she learned that the coroner who testified falsely had committed suicide by biting his tongue the previous night, a part of the Baek family's thorough arrangements. Madame Baek ordered her servants to give false testimony, slandering a female servant for frequently bothering Baek Do-gwang. Suddenly, Gu Deok appeared, and after being mocked by Madame Baek, she saw more clearly the nature of this world. The Women's Federation was a microcosm of the entire feudal dynasty's nobility and officials, with servants treated as property no better than pigs or dogs. The Federation would never allow Gu Deok to win the case. If a servant died, it would backfire on the master, making the servant a bad asset. From the beginning, Gu Deo was challenging the entire Federation alone. After leaving, Gu Deo headed straight to the government office. With no legitimate reason to visit, she had to climb over the wall while avoiding the officials. Unexpectedly, she encountered Cheon Seung-hwi there, dressed as an official. Initially, Gu Deo thought he was there to bother her, but she discovered that he was skilled in martial arts. Cheon Seung-hwi had the body of a scholar. Gu Deo realized she must have mistaken him for someone else, especially after she had accidentally revealed her real name. Fortunately, he seemed unconcerned and did not pursue the matter for the time being. At night, the identity of the man emerged. He was Song Seo-in, the son of a county official. Both father and son were aware that the Women's Federation was meddling behind the scenes in the case, and they deeply feared the Federation's influence. Coincidentally, over the past 3 years, Ok Tae-young had written several letters proposing reforms to the Federation. Now, carrying the identity of Ok Tae-young, Gu Deo was fervently advocating for the servants, which greatly improved Song Seo-in's impression of her. The next day, Gu Deo sought assistance from the local external affairs department, but they all declined upon hearing they would have to debate with the expert hired by the Baek family. Moreover, Gu Deo encountered a group of bounty hunters checking passers-by with a warrant. She immediately took a detour to escape, but her suspicious actions led to her being surrounded. They attempted to capture Gu Deo for verification. Just then, Song Seo-in, who was nearby, saw her. He was about to help when he saw Gu Deo fend off the bounty hunters with a small knife and then climb over a wall to escape, only to accidentally run into a dead end. At that moment, Song Seo-in arrived and quickly dispersed the few people there. Meanwhile, a flaw in the Baek family's scheme emerged. Their servant named Stone was imprisoned. He received an aloe secretly sent by Gu Deo, which moved him deeply. Faced with being scapegoated by his own household and the kindness of a stranger, Stone grew resentful and made a bold decision to disclose everything about the case. Madame Baek, to cut off Baek Do-gwang's infatuation with a female servant, had forced Stone to kidnap and defile her, and then arranged for Baek Do-gwang to witness the act. Madame Baek had warned Stone that if he did not comply, both he and the female servant would die. Unexpectedly, the servant resisted fiercely and suffered a fatal head injury during the struggle. Baek Do-gwang was devastated, never imagining his unrequited love could lead to the servant's death. Subsequently, his ruthless father arranged for a coroner to give false testimony. Tears streamed down Gu Deo's face as she listened. She asked Stone if the female servant had left any last words, only to learn that the servant had also harbored affection for Baek Do-gwang, but kept her feelings hidden due to her status, not wanting to trouble him. That evening, Gu Deo went to relay the maid's last words to Baek Do-gwang. Seeing that the maid had treasured the gift he gave her, Baek Do-gwang was overwhelmed with tears. However, he was also conflicted and unable to testify against his parents. Gu Deo did not pressure him and turned to discuss the case with Song Seo-in. Song Seo-in believed that the truth must be revealed and the Baek family punished. However, Gu Deo felt that the direction of the case would likely lead to Stone being sentenced to death, accidentally absolving Baek's parents. In that case, Madame Mo would be executed for false accusation. Gu Deo had to think of another plan. On the day of the trial, she did not reveal Stone as her trump card, meaning her side lacked evidence. Although Gu Deo used the laws to save Madame Mo from execution, she still faced flogging. Fearing the frail Madame Mo might not survive, Gu Deo chose to take the punishment herself. The onlookers were shocked, having never seen such a compassionate master. Madame Mo refused to accept this. At this point, Baek Do-gwang could no longer bear it. He confessed his affection for the maid, and falsely claimed he had killed her. In his view, this would spare Madame Mo from punishment and not implicate his parents. Baek Do-gwang was then detained. With Madame Mo freed, she and Gu Deo gave the maid her last rites. Madame Mo tearfully wished the maid not to be her daughter in the next life, a statement which was actually a condemnation of the unfairness of the world where poverty seems a curse, rendering the poor's lives cheap from the moment of their birth. Afterwards, Gu Deo and Song Seo-in exchanged gossip. Cheon Seung-hwi was Gu Deo's first love, but like the maid, she avoided the relationship due to their status difference. Gu Deo temporarily lost a romantic opportunity but she also gained a new purpose. Seeing so many slaves express their gratitude, Gu Deo vaguely saw where her future path lay. Soon after, the county official extended an invitation. Under her invitation, Gu Deo became a professional external advisor, specifically helping illiterate poor people with legal cases. Just then, an unexpected event occurred. Korea faced a drought. Hearing that balancing yin and yang could bring rain, an order was issued for all unmarried noble officials' children to marry. The Women's Association targeted Song Seo-in to ease their relationship with his father, allowing Song Seo-in's father to support their candidate in replacing Baek Do-gwang's father. They decided to proactively show goodwill by marrying into Song Seo-in's family, and even opened their granaries to show sincerity. Song Seo-in's father quickly agreed. Unexpectedly, he tricked everyone, and the marriage document was received by Gu Deo instead. For this, her grandmother even made a special trip back. Song Seo-in's father had only intended to deceive the Women's Association to get food for disaster relief. Both Song Seo-in and his father admired Gu Deo for her integrity, kindness, and capability. With the royal command also requiring marriage, they chose the most suitable Gu Deo. Reluctantly, Gu Deo approached Song Seo-in to refuse, explaining that her secret, once revealed, could implicate both families. However, Song Seo-in, already captivated by her charismatic character, insisted on knowing the reason for her refusal. Just as Gu Deo was about to reveal that she was merely the maid of a young lady, the young lady herself appeared unexpectedly. Fortunately, Gu Deok, dressed as a noble, was not recognized by the young lady and narrowly escaped. Afterwards, Gu Deok confessed her secret to her fiancé. She did not dare hope to marry Song Seo-in, only asking him to keep her secret. To her surprise, Song Seo-in not only didn't mind but also shared his own secret. He preferred men. He feared death if his homosexuality was discovered. Previously, Gu Deok promised to repay him. Now, marrying him would be the best way to do so, and he would protect her in return. Convinced, Gu Deok agreed, and they set a date for the wedding. On the wedding day, Cheon Seung-hwi secretly attended, heartbroken to see his beloved Gu Deok marry someone else. He was puzzled to see the groom looked just like him. That day, noble leader Lee Chung-il learned of a gold mine in Cheongsu County's Yunfeng Mountain. For money and power, he decided to mine it, conspiring with other nobles at the stay local office. Due to narrow mine shafts, only children could fit, so Lee Chung-il and the merchant leader forged indenture documents and sold the children to the merchants. Later, when a good citizen discovered their child had been sold, they pleaded in the streets for their return, only to be beaten. Passing by, Gu Deok rescued the citizen and discovered the forged document. To investigate further, Gu Deok and her entourage, in disguise, visited the merchant group. She found a heavily guarded room, suspecting it held the children about to be sold. Gu Deok immediately returned home to inform the county official. However, on her way, she saw Song Seo-in in a place called Love Pavilion, a curious sight given his disinterest in women. Gu Deok sensed that Song Seo-in was hiding something else from her. After returning home, Gu Deok reported to the county official that the merchant group was trafficking children. The official looked grave as he had already received an anonymous letter via Arrow, also mentioning the child trafficking. Someone was tracking him, so he had spread news of his trip to Cheongsu County as a decoy while investigating the merchants secretly. After the news was released, the merchants indeed moved the children under cover of night. The county official and Gu Deok intercepted them en route. A clash ensued as the merchants attacked. During the skirmish, Gu Deok untied the children. An assailant charged at her, but a masked man saved her. His mask fell off during the fight, revealing he was Song Seo-in. Before she could react, Song Seo-in had fled with a child. Outnumbered, some merchants escaped with a few children. Knowing Song Seo-in was hiding something, Gu Deok went to the Love Pavilion. Anticipating her arrival, Song Seo-in had someone lead her through a secret door to a hidden base. There, she saw several boys intensely training in martial arts. Concerned, Gu Deok asked if he was plotting a rebellion, as training in groups could lead to accusations of rebellion in Joseon. Song Seo-in explained they were not rebels, but the love group, which he led. Like him, all these boys were gay. Discovery of their orientation could lead to abuse or death. The love group aimed to rescue these boys and teach them martial arts for self-defense. He had previously sent the anonymous letter to his father to initiate an investigation into the merchants after they captured a gay boy. He was determined to create a world accepting of differences for these children. Although Gu Deok understood Song Seo-in, she still felt it was too dangerous. One evening, as Gu Deok was preparing to leave, a commotion erupted in the Love Pavilion. A nobleman had taken a liking to a musician and attempted to seize him for entertainment, only to discover that the musician, who looked like a woman, was actually male. The nobleman felt humiliated by this gender ambiguity and claimed it disrupted the local customs of Cheongsu County. He insisted on sending the musician to the detention center for a death sentence. Gu Deok intervened immediately, warning the nobleman that mistakes should be dealt with by the county office, not the detention center. She threatened to report the detention center to the county office for unlawfully detaining an innocent person if they proceeded. Speechless, the nobleman ultimately handed the musician over to the county office. Upon hearing this, Song Seo-in was eager to rescue the musician, knowing that regardless of the location, the outcome would likely be execution. However, the next day in court, nobles led by Lee Chung-il, determined to uphold local morals, unanimously pushed for the musician's execution. At that moment, Gu Deok appeared with a scroll, declaring her intention to defend the musician. The county official said no defense was necessary as there were no laws pertaining to intersex people, leaving them unprotected by law. Gu Deok argued that although there were no specific laws, there were precedents in how intersex people were judged. She cited a scroll recording a case where a monarch did not sentence an intersex person to death, but sent them to live alone in a remote area. Her statement left the nobles speechless. The county official ultimately decided to report the musician's case to the royal court, awaiting further instructions. Eventually, the musician was temporarily released without charge and returned to the Love Pavilion. Song Seo-in was very grateful to Gu Deok, but Gu Deok remained uneasy. She noticed a heart-shaped brand on Song Seo-in's shoulder. Korean law strictly prohibits branding on the body, and discovery could lead to charges of rebellion. Song Seo-in saw Gu Deok's concern and offered to dissolve the Love Pavilion and just be a husband and son if Gu Deok asked him to, promising immediate compliance. Afterward, a child previously rescued mentioned hearing a merchant leader talk about going to Yunfeng Mountain. Gu Deok rushed home to inform the county official, suspecting the children might be sent there. The official ordered a search of Yunfeng Mountain to start the next day. Lee Chung-il and the merchant leader, aware of the imminent search, feared their gold mining operation would be discovered, which would ruin them. They had to stop the official from searching the mountain. Unexpectedly, Lee Chung-il heard from a mining child that a masked person had visited them at the merchant's hold, promising rescue and martial arts training at the Love Pavilion. Hearing martial arts, Lee Chung-il saw an opportunity to accuse them of being rebels, which would divert the official from the search to capture these supposed rebels instead. He reported the Love Pavilion as a rebel base to the inspector that very night. The inspector immediately ordered the official to pause the mountain search and capture the rebels. Lee Chung-il and his men arrived at the Love Pavilion, discovered a secret passage into their chamber, and while the musician tried to help Song Seo-in escape, Lee Chung-il killed him, claiming he was a rebel and showing the inspector the branded musicians. Now, they needed to capture all the rebels. The official had to cease the mountain search and gather forces to arrest the rebels, detaining anyone found with a brand. Gu Deok urged Song Seo-in to leave, but before he could, the county official insisted on examining him to ensure his innocence. Gu Deok stated that she had already checked herself, which reassured the county official, who then prepared to leave. Unexpectedly, Song Seo-in suddenly declared that the accused were not rebels. He then revealed his own identity as the leader of the Love Pavilion by taking off his clothes. The county official angrily questioned him. Song Seo-in explained that he, like the others, belonged to a sexual minority not accepted by society. Gu Deok also stepped forward, admitting her awareness of his identity and hoping for the official's understanding. Unable to sway his son, the official decided to sever ties, ordering him to leave Qingshui County and never return. However, as he and Gu Deok were about to flee, they were spotted by soldiers. They ran and hid in a courtyard. Gu Deok pushed Song Seo-in into a room and faced the approaching soldiers herself. Nonetheless, The soldiers dragged Song Seo-in from the room and demanded he strip for an inspection. Gu Deok was terrified, but the soldiers found nothing unusual and left. At that moment, the real Song Seo-in emerged from the room. It turned out he had hidden in Cheon Seung-hwi's room, who had swapped identities with him in the confusion. This switch allowed Song Seo-in and Gu Deok to escape danger. The next day, Song Seo-in disguised himself and left Chingshui County, promising Gu Deok he would return. Upon learning of his son's departure, the county official instructed Gu Deok to immediately divorce Song Seo-in and start anew, as the hunt for rebels was not over and he expected to be held accountable by higher authorities. He did not want to implicate Gu Deok. However, just as he finished speaking, the inspector arrived with a royal decree stating the official's failure to capture the rebels amounted to treason. The official was stripped of his position, and his family and assets were confiscated to reward Lee Chung-il for his role in capturing the rebels. This meant that Gu Deok, as part of the official's family, would also be taken under Lee Chung-il's control. Suddenly, without her husband and support, Gu Deok faced the challenge of how to turn her life around. The county magistrate's father-in-law was harmed by a villain and died suddenly from the shock. The servant Gu Deok, pretending to be a noble lady, also became a widow. Cheon Seung-hwi, worried about Gu Deok, immediately came to her aid and found her mourning her father-in-law. However, Gu Deok wanted the young master to stay away from her, fearing she was bad luck. Cheon Seung-hwi asked why she wanted to be like Ok Tae-young and if Ok Tae-young would be discouraged in such a situation. He encouraged Gu Deok to persevere and investigate the truth. With the young master's encouragement, Gu Deok realized the importance of uncovering the truth. Meanwhile, the sensible younger brother-in-law planned to live with distant relatives since his father was killed and his brother was missing. He thought he would be a burden to his sister-in-law, with whom he had no blood relation. Gu Deok disagreed, stating she, as the eldest daughter-in-law, not only considered him family, but also needed to uphold the family's honor. So, she asked him to trust her, as she would seek justice for their father-in-law. Gu Deok then met with the inspector and asked him to investigate Yunfeng Mountain. However, the inspector felt it could wait for the new county official. Gu Deok was puzzled why the inspector decided her husband led a rebellion without evidence, revealing that the Park family had reported it, possibly implicating Lee Chung-il. The Parks had mentioned a marriage alliance but disliked the head lady for not being perceptive, which Madame Mo recognized in the afternoon, suggesting selling her would save face. Soon Gu Deok heard about Madame Mo's predicament and went to Lee Chung-il's house to ask to buy her. Lee Chung-il, remembering past grievances, said he'd consider it if Gu Deok knelt, which she did without hesitation, promising to help him someday. Lee Chung-il ignored her and walked away, leaving the head lady thoughtful as she watched Gu Deok. Until the early morning, Lee Chung-il secretly returned Madame Mo to her. This changed Gu Deok's view of the head lady significantly. That morning, the younger brother-in-law learned that Lee Chung-il had fabricated a charge against the county magistrate to cover something up, so he immediately informed his sister-in-law. Meanwhile, the head lady found records in the study of her husband secretly mining gold. She had always opposed it, knowing the whole family could be executed if discovered. Unexpectedly, Lee Chung-il cursed his wife and told her to mind her own life and not interfere in other matters. This made the head lady realize how dreadful her husband was, prompting her to leave a letter and depart from the county the next day. Upon learning this, the Park couple somewhat rejoiced, pretending to worry about their in-laws' safety while actually manipulating Lee Chung-il. To prevent their son from continuously searching for his mother, they spread rumors that the head lady had eloped with a man, discrediting her. Meanwhile, Gu Deok and the young master decided to investigate Yunfeng Mountain. Following clues, they first visited a temple and found a dying musician inside. The monks revealed that the county magistrate had brought him there the previous night after finding him still alive, suspecting something unusual. Due to severe blood loss, it was uncertain when he would wake up. After bidding farewell to the master, Gu Deok and the young master ventured deeper into Yunfeng Mountain. During a brief rest in a simple straw hut, although they were together, it was only in the storyteller Cheon Seung-hwi's narrative that they enjoyed hot chicken soup and even slept embraced. However, this was all a fantasy, and they rested separately behind closed doors for the night. On the second day into the mountain, Gu Deok and the young master were discovered. After a chase, they were cornered at a cliff edge. However, the young master saw it as a perfect escape opportunity and chose to jump off the cliff with Gu Deok. They were lucky to fall into a lake. Gu Deok, who couldn't swim, lost consciousness and was revived by Cheon Seung-hwi's CPR. By evening, they could not light a fire due to the pursuers, and Gu Deok's wet clothes kept him feverish. At that moment, a fire lit up the night behind them. Cheon Seung-hwi sensed the pursuers catching up and decided to perform a knife dance to protect his loved one. Unexpectedly, they encountered a group of civilians, one of whom recognized Gu Deok. It was Stone, whom Gu Deok had spared after he accidentally killed a child. Gu Deok wanted to continue searching for the children, but the villagers, concerned for their safety, insisted on helping. After traversing the mountains, they found Mr. Park's gold mining site before sunset and rescued the children trapped there for several days. While Gu Deok was reflecting on clearing his father-in-law's name, he unexpectedly saved the suicidal lady. Learning that she was unaware of the mining, Gu Deok urged her to repay the children by living. On the other side, an anxious Lee Chung-il contacted Mr. Park after hearing rumors, asking how to remedy the situation now that the mining was exposed. Mr. Park claimed ignorance, indicating that the true instigators were starting to distance themselves. Moreover, the former county magistrate warned them that if anything happened to him, they would all suffer. Lee Chung-il immediately understood the implication and collapsed on the ground. The next morning, he planned to surrender at the county office. Just as he stepped out, Gu Deok arrived. Lee Chung-il's eldest son explained that he would return all the gold mined and provide ample compensation to the abducted children. However, Gu Deok interrupted him before he could finish. Lee Chung-il, standing by, lost his temper, asking if what they had done was not enough. Gu Deok stared at him resolutely, vowing to make him pay. Before Lee Chung-il's case began, Gu Deok's younger uncle pleaded with the inspector general, hoping to clear their father, who was falsely accused of rebellion. He even brought a witness, the musician Gu Deok had met at the temple. The musician stated that their charity group was to protect children of the same sex, teaching them self-defense not for rebellion, but for their own protection. The inspector general was puzzled as to why this was only being disclosed now. The musician explained that someone wanted him to die as a traitor, so he had been stabbed and remained unconscious until now. Clearly, he was referring to Lee Chung-il. However, when asked who tried to frame him, the musician claimed he could not remember. Everyone was shocked by this, except Gu Deok, who seemed unsurprised. The inspector general deemed the musician's testimony reliable and decided to submit a request to the king, believing that the truth would eventually emerge. Then it was Lee Chung-il's turn to confess. To protect his family, he took all the blame onto himself. Despite the inspector general's pressing, he mentioned nothing about the mastermind behind him. At that moment, Gu Deok stepped forward to formally offer to defend Lee Chung-il. Everyone was stunned. Why would she defend the man responsible for her father-in-law's death? The inspector general was also puzzled. Knowing the law so well, why would she want to exonerate such a villain? Gu Deok explained that illegal mining was rampant in the country. Despite the king's repeated decrees, controlling it was challenging. If Lee Chung-il were harshly punished now, others would be too scared to surrender. Moreover, Lee Chung-il had returned all the gold mined and paid double the wages to the detained children. Therefore, Gu Deok boldly requested the official to pardon Lee Chung-il's death sentence, believing this act would enrich the nation and its people. After Gu Deok's impassioned speech, the inspector general spared Lee Chung-il and his family from the death penalty. Hence, Lee Chung-il was stripped of his leadership position and released without charges, but he had to immediately return the mansion and servants that belonged to the magistrate. Gu Deok warned Lee Chung-il that he was not forgiven. Her defense was partly to repay the favor of the lady who returned Madame Mo, and partly because her father-in-law had instructed the day before the incident that everyone should be equal before the law. Even an enemy deserved a fair defense to truly serve justice, a lesson he urged his daughter-in-law to remember. It seemed the former magistrate had foreseen Lee Chung-il's intent against him and had discussed this with Gu Deok beforehand. Realizing the truth, Lee Chung-il was deeply remorseful and promised to return all acquired wealth and servants, thus restoring the father-in-law's honor. Later, Gu Deok and Cheon Seung-hwi faced their moment of parting. Before leaving, He retrieved the button that signified their engagement. Although she did not leave with him, she wanted to tell him as a former servant that he was her first love. Initially, she had avoided him due to their different statuses and circumstances, and later, she had to refuse him again due to pressing matters. However, she had always missed him. Although Cheon Seung-hwi did not turn back, he was already in tears. The two lovers had to part, perhaps leaving Gu Deok with lasting regret. 7 years later, Gu Deok established the largest justice department in the county town. Today was also the day her younger brother-in-law, the top scholar, returned home. Over the years, Do Gyum not only saw Gu Deok as a sister and friend, but even as a mother. Thus, to outsiders, their relationship seemed unusually close. Additionally, when Gu Deok faces challenges or emotional dilemmas, she writes letters to her husband, who has not yet returned, even though she knows he will not receive them. Now that her younger brother-in-law is of marriageable age, she is unsure how to proceed. One day, while Do Gyum was shopping, he accidentally bumped into a young lady. After she politely apologized and walked away, he picked up an accessory she dropped and tried to follow her, only to be warned not to approach her in such a manner. According to Article 355 of the Great Ming Code, coercing someone into action is punishable by 80 strokes of the cane, and he was repeatedly advised not to follow her. However, the young lady's personality was strikingly similar to Gu Deok's and immediately fascinated Do Gyum. Meanwhile, the lady sought help at the External Affairs Department, claiming she was from Yicheon County, where a neighbor was fired under the pretext of having a skin rash and didn't even receive his wages. Gu Deok appreciated her conduct and speech. To verify her story, Gu Deok visited Yicheon County and found that not only were these people non-contagious, but Mi Ryung had also isolated the patients in a courtyard and cared for them herself. The next day, Mi Ryung visited to thank Gu Deok and coincidentally met Do Gyum, who was preparing for a matchmaking session. Through their interactions, she realized she had misunderstood him previously. Observers could clearly see that the young people admired each other. That night, Gu Deok sent her brother-in-law with some fine aloe to get to know Mi Ryung at her residence. Before they reached her house, they found her in a panic, seemingly heading somewhere unusual. It was unusual for a daughter of a prominent family to be out at night. Curious, the siblings followed her and discovered that Mi Ryung was taking food to a wife often abused by her husband while he was away. This touching scene further increased their admiration for her. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Mi Ryung proposed to help others like Gu Deok, and she successfully joined the External Affairs Department. However, unbeknownst to Gu Deok, all the patients were actors hired by Mi Ryung's father at a high cost, including the abused couple, all part of a plan to seek revenge on Gu Deok. 2 days later, a servant approached Gu Deok, asking her to save Cheon Seung-hwi in another county. He allegedly rushed into a theater with a sickle, and if found guilty, he could face life imprisonment. Upon hearing this, Gu Deok immediately informed her brother-in-law, hoping he would allow her to defend an old acquaintance. Do Gyum, knowing his sister-in-law rarely traveled far, realized she was doing this for someone who looked much like her brother. He did not stop her, but instead asked her to return soon after resolving the matter. However, on the day of departure, Gu Deok inadvertently saw her husband. Disregarding all propriety, she loudly called out his name. Although he clearly heard her, he boarded a passenger ship without responding. In that moment, Gu Deok felt as if she had lost something, standing on the dock, unable to voice the words at the tip of her tongue. She could not understand why her husband was so resolute, nor could she fathom why she had persevered for 7 years.